So we have our final panel now before lunch. We spoke about the modular system. We spoke about integrated approach between different stakeholders. This panel discussion is about championing an integrated design approach. And please help me welcome our panelists, Gavin Appleby, Managing Director at Effico, George Basmaji, Building Services Director at AECOM, Bill Jolly, Regional Director of MEP Solutions Arcades, and Reed Donovan, Regional Director at Chapman BDSP, and the new chair of the SIPSI UAE region. So, integrated design approach. All the new green building standards, they always, their first requirement is integrated design approach, which is a good thing, very good thing to have. Doesn't happen all the time. So it is mandated by green building standards and regulation in both Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Is that approach being followed, and what are the challenges faced in trying to implement an integrated design approach?
Okay, I'm first. We actually, the four of us, we discussed outside whilst we were waiting, and being the only contractor on this panel, I was surprised to see complete alignment. So I think we're off to a good start. Short answer is no, it's not being done in this market. And frankly, it's disappointing. We've been waiting for years to see the approach change. So one of the things that I look at is I still fail to understand how people can be targeting LEED Gold buildings without an integrated design approach which addresses A, the technology you're using, B, the execution strategy with the contractor. And until the whole approach changes where, and I'm a big advocate, as Rami was saying before too, for design and build. It's a background I come from in Australia. We do everything in design and build, and we are involved at the first step. We work with the consultants, working with the consultants to develop a concept design. We eliminate all the coordination issues. And if this model was adopted in this market, I can assure you project timelines would be shortened. Commercial disputes on variations and prolongation would be eliminated, not completely, but would be minimised. And most importantly, the client would end up with a better product. So I think, I'll be interested to hear what my colleagues here say. But one thing I just want to mention also, which is important. At the moment, my view is that the relationship between contractors and consultants is strained. And the reason it's strained is because of this very, very out-of-date model of constructing projects. This model of engaging a consultant, bringing contractors in at the end of a design in a squeeze program. These guys have probably been squeezed on their fees. It's out of date. It's 20 years old, and until the industry changes that, you're going to continue to see the same behaviour.
Thank you. George, when it comes to integrated design approach within the same consultancy, even sometimes we face difficulties. So let's say in AECOM you have all the different services under one umbrella. How are you tackling this integrated design approach?
You think coming from a multidisciplinary practice, you think it will be easier to implement. But I can tell you, you will have all kinds of challenges, mainly challenges coming from the consultant himself and from the client. From the consultant, you will face, first of all, the budgetary challenge, because you will have to put all your effort at the beginning. So having all these people will increase your cost at the beginning, but it will be an exchange of cost. You will take it from the end and put it at the front end. The second one is changing the mindset, because in the conventional design, we used to receive from the architect and the client a box, and we will have to accommodate our MEP equipment inside it. So the integrated design approach is different. It's an iterative one. So you will face a difficulty at the beginning to convince people that the MEP input should be at the beginning. It's not at the end. Now, from the client side, you will need to have the buy-in from the client, because he will need to be aware that he should pay more at the beginning to maintain the cash flow of the consultant on the design side. And on the operation, on the construction, he needs to be sure that a little bit of capex later on will be rewarded on the OPEX. So the overall life cycle cost analysis will be in his favor, especially if the end user is in the same time the client, which is not always happening.
Yeah, true. That is true. Bill, what are the challenges for the integrated design approach for a consultant?
I think
for an MEP,
I'm not
because
sure.
you know, as MEP engineers or MEP departments, we're always sometimes waiting for input rather than providing input.
I think some of the key things from an MEP point of view, I think if you just take the design process as a whole, we're almost in like an environment where it's a bit forced. We do obviously go through an integrated design process. We do that. But in my opinion, I think there's room for improvement, and there's room for us to do that much better. And I think the key thing is, you mentioned at the beginning about sustainability, and I think that's one of the reasons why an integrated design approach is a requirement from a sustainability point of view. What I think we need to do as a design team, we need to better understand what each of the disciplines' needs are, so that the MEP design consultant needs to understand what the architectural aspirations are for the project, what are the structural aspirations for the project. Likewise, the architect needs to understand a bit better what the MEP aspirations are for that project. And ultimately, in a sustainable environment, from an MEP engineer, our main target is obviously to reduce energy consumption of the building and to reduce water consumption wherever we possibly can, are two key drivers. So what we need to do as design engineers, we need to get that message across a bit better to the various disciplines that we work with. And likewise, the disciplines that we work with need to, exemplify what their aspirations are from a project. They want a better facade, they want a better orientation, they want more efficiency from the design, etc., etc. So once people understand what the aspirations are from each of the different disciplines, then we can work in an integrated manner to achieve, the most cost-effective, sustainable solution that satisfies all parties and all the requirements. And to me, a key component of achieving that is then utilising tools which we have available to us as design engineers. We should be trying to manoeuvre building physics and energy modelling more into the forefront of the design process. And effectively, each of the aspirations from the disciplines feed into an energy model. That energy model would then provide the results to the design team to enable the design team then to make informed decisions on which way we manoeuvre with the design.
Yeah, that's an interesting point when talking about energy modeling. It's currently being used as a tool to prove that the building is eligible for a green building standard LEED, be it LEED or Istidama, rather than a design tool. There's actually a new ASHRAE standard that has been published that shows exactly what are the steps that need to be done when you're doing energy modeling.
Yeah.
So it tells you that you need to do pre-design energy modeling to advise the architect and the MEP engineer what are the directions that they should take. Reid, what do you think? What do you think about the challenges and you face? And I know that you started as a plumbing engineer and now you're MEP director, so you've seen the whole perspective.
Yeah, I'm a lot older than I look, perhaps, but I shouldn't say that about myself. But I've been doing this for 25 years, pure design in the building services environment, and yes, started as on the tools when I was very young as a plumber, and then went straight into a design office, and been through some amazing companies along the way, where I've been lucky enough to work with some amazing people that instilled something in the approach to design that's perhaps still not quite there even after all these years. So working for companies like Arup and Burrow Happold over the years, it's a very different approach to design. You know, it is a very much an integrated design approach. It's not about any one party really being at the forefront of that. It's about a coming together of a pure design team physically at the table from the outset. So the key for us, I mean, Chapman BDSP are in this region perceived as a relatively small company, but we do lead consult projects, even though we don't have a one-stop shop like I did when I worked with Bill at Arcadis, where everything was in-house, same as ACOM. We have the agility to go and hand-pick a team that's actually applicable to the project. And what I mean by that is we will put a lot of our effort into the front-end design, because if we don't get it right from the concept stage, or what we deem as actually a concept plus, it's concept plus a little bit more thinking before we progress any further. The project is going to find it very challenging to succeed from that point onwards. And even before that, which was another question later on, you know, the pre-concept stage, you know, we don't get involved in that stage, and we need to, because we have a massive influence on the design and the building form and the architecture. So the key thing for me is that the building services engineering design is the nucleus to some extent to what we do as a building design team, and we're there to support the architect and the architecture of the building. And I think we forget that, and I think we get ourselves wrapped up in, you know, our pumps and boilers, and we lose the big picture. We're there to minimise the amount of space that the services element takes up, so the client can get his maximum return on investment of the property that he's going to sell or manage. And we must meet those metrics in our design, and that has to come from right at the start of the process. So it's a true integrated design process with everyone at the table. Structures, MEP, architecture to start with, and then you bring in the specialisms as required.
Reid, again, another question for you. I think, Georges, you spoke about that a little bit earlier. How can investment time upfront ensure common understanding and buy-in among all stakeholders? And is that time being considered when preparing projects timelines? Because, you know, sometimes when you price projects, do you like put that integrated design process as a requirement and as an upfront cost that has to come in the beginning rather than at the end?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's aware, and it's no longer a secret. It used to be a bit of a secret amongst most consultants that most of the back-end design, especially out of the Middle East, is not designed in country. You know, it's fronted and managed in country, but there's not a single, there are some firms, but in the main it's offshored. And we're doing that to meet the demands of the market here. Our fee structure's down to a baseline where we can't afford to do it in-house. We can't have offices with a team of 200 people delivering, if it's 2D CAD or modelling, you know, thousands and thousands of drawings and outputs. So the actual, if you look at a fee structure, traditionally you'd have, you know, 10% of the fee, 20%, you know, it go through the stages in a logical manner. It's changed completely. So if you look at the balance of the fee now, the client will be willing to pay a little bit more up front for that, you know, that upfront thinking and intellect, because all of the front-end design is done in country. It isn't offshored. The skill set's here for that, and then it supports the project continually through that. And it's the back-end design where we try and add value to the client, yeah? Not the front-end design. It's a back-end design that a lot of consultants struggle to make any money on whatsoever because of the volume of work and the time frame that we're trying to produce it in. So we've got to work a lot smarter, and we are. We're completely changing the way that the model of design in the last 3 to 5 years, especially in the last 2 years, it's completely changing. We are adapting and changing to the environment we find ourselves, and it's not a negative change, I would say, it's a positive change. We're thinking differently, we're approaching designs in a much smarter way, because we have to.
Adapting, yeah,
We have to adapt, yeah.
Bill, what do you think about the, you know, project timelines? Is that being considered? Integrated design approach, does it really help in reducing project timelines, or does it add time to the project timeline? Or is it just shifting resources and time between the pre-concept concept compared to the detailed design?
To me, I think it's very similar to what Reid was just saying a minute ago. The design process and the timeline to do that design will remain the same. It's just the approach that we take would be different. And what Reid was saying there about we are doing different things. Things are done a lot differently than what they was done 4, 5, 6 years ago. And so the timeline remains the same, the quantity of resources remain the same, so the actual fee for doing that work remains the same. It's just a tweak and a different way of doing it. The interesting thing though with working in this region and in the model what Reid is talking about, where there is an outsourcing use of effectively a production facility, but likewise with other design team members that you're working with, the region itself entices global model operation. So what I find interested in the integrated design process, I was talking about before about an integrated design process around thermal modelling and getting the right engineering solution. That's one component of it. Then there's another much bigger component. It's working across regions, across time zones, with different cultures and different people, and then trying to bring all that together on a global footprint into moulded into a sort of integrated design process, utilising tools, again, that we've got available similar to the software packages for energy modelling. We're utilising Skype and conference calls and, conferencing facilities where we can do presentations, present drawings to each other and all that type of stuff. And then with the cultural differences and the magnitude of the projects and the different people that you're working with comes the characters that you're working with, and it's trying to mould a design team where it operates most effectively and trying to recognise people's individual characters and putting teams of people together that can work in a positive manner and working in a fully integrated process to get to the right result. So there's for an integrated design process, there's challenges across the board. Does it cost more? My answer would be no. How are we addressing it? We're doing things differently than what we have done before in the past, and we're utilising tools that are available to us in the industry to try and facilitate the process and make it better.
Thank you. Georges, when it comes to tight schedules and integrated design approach, like the client tells you I need a design in 3 months, this is, for the integrated design approach, you need much more time during concept design. How do you tackle that, and how do you convince the client that we need more time, you want a proper design, we need more time to execute it?
Yeah, usually, first of all, I agree with Reid and Bill about the approach, the new approach, that all of the design consultancy, they have now GDCs, Global Design Centers, all over the world. But it would be always very beneficial to have the front end here, next to the client, in order to achieve the targets of the approach itself, and then the back end will be done in GDCs. In terms of timelines, I think the first thing to do is to convince all the stakeholders that this will be beneficial for all of them. First of all, for the consultant, it's easier to have the changes at the beginning and less costly for them, because if you will have to do it later on, it will be a rework, and we all know, you and all the consultants here, how much it's costly to do the rework in a later stage. And the second one, it's for the consultant also, it's about his reputation. When you are expert in this approach, you will have a good reputation in the market, and you will be able to maintain your skills. The retention of your skills will be better. From the contractor side, having the contractor at the beginning, all the benefits are there. He will be injecting all his lessons learned with you from day one. So he will be able, from one point, to avoid any reworks or any variation orders later on. The third one is the client, and I think here is the most important thing, to convince the client about the importance of this change in the timeline. you manage to convince him through the fact that he will have a comfortable building, first of all. He will have a good energy performance building. And the third one, easily maintainable. We did not touch on the facility maintenance later on. And on top of all of this, the saving that he can have later on. Take a simple example of the right thermal performance of the glazing. It will reduce the heat load, it will reduce the size of the ducts, and you can reduce the floor-to-floor height, and in some of the towers, you may have an additional floor. So by this tool, you will manage to convince your client and all the stakeholders of the importance of having this approach, even if they are paying sometimes more or taking more time in duration.
Thank you. What do you think about who are the stakeholders that need to be engaged during concept design? So you have the MEP designer, contractor, main contractor, MEP contractor, facility managers. Like, who are the stakeholders that need to be sitting on one table to come up with the proper integrated concept design?
It starts with the building owner, the developer. But I think that when you go down, you've got a couple of models you can follow. You can follow a model which says that you've got two parts to a design. They talk about the back end and the front end. So, you know, the back end is done twice. It's done first by the consultant traditionally, and then the MEP contractor does it again. Then you have the front end, which is, you know, where you really build the whole concept. If you could convince a client, dare a client would try this, to allow an MEP contractor to put a target price and a GMP price as an MEP element for a contract, and then to be able to work in collaboration with a consultant to actually design to that price, rather than doing it in reverse, I think you would get a good result more times than not. But I think you could probably convince the consultants that this would be a good model. The building owner will need maturity in his way of thinking. And most importantly, when you go through this process also, you can actually engage the authorities. So if the MEP contractor is developing all of the single line schematics, he's developing the layout, he's doing the coordination, assisting the consultant with the shafts, he can also in parallel be talking to the authorities. These consultants can be working with you, verifying on behalf of the client. They can also be doing things like a CFD analysis, they can be doing energy models. And whilst all this process is going, the project timeline is moving. Nothing's stopping, everything's been completed. So that's one model. The other model is to go to an MEP contractor and say, we would like you, this is our brief, we would like you to build a D&B model of MEP, and we would select the consultant, and the consultant would work for us. That's also a model I've used before.
Yep, me too.
And that's very successful also. You don't have many stakeholders: consultant, developer, and contractor. They're the only three that you need to get around the table. So I'm hopeful we'll see it here soon.
Reid, at the first panel discussion, some of the contractors were complaining, MEP contractors complaining about some design elements that are left for the contractor. That we're seeing this more and more happening, where the consultant will say, well, the contractor needs to develop that part of the design. How does that work with the integrated design approach? Is this something
Well, it doesn't.
that's going away from the integrated design approach?
I just don't believe in that way of working. A design should be a sound design that any contractor could pick up and run with. Right. It's a cop-out. You know, it's not. I don't advocate that. You know, the people I work with over the years never have advocated that either. We're design consultants. We need to make sure that what we design fits within the building. It's buildable, it's maintainable, and it's been well thought through. You know, the days of doing a half-cocked design and passing it to a contractor and saying, away you go, guys, you know, you're on your own. Actually, in this region, it doesn't work that way. In the UK, when I worked in the UK for some years, that was the norm, you know. Yeah. I didn't take designs beyond SD, schematic design stage, on lots of big projects. Designed out of London in different parts of the world, because it would go to a local consultant to do what we deemed as back-end design, and then they would put a lot of pressure onto a local contractor to do, you know, to do a lot of the, you know, let's make it fit. That doesn't work here because I don't know of a contractor that ordinarily takes on the PI for design, which is why the D&B model hasn't really been rolled out in a big way here. There is an issue, it's a contractual issue that a contractor, quite rightly actually, to be fair to contractors, are not going to take that design responsibility on, where me as a consultant pass the design to them that's, let's call it 70% complete, and expect the contractor to take on board all of my PI for the rest of the project. It doesn't work that way. So we've got a duty of care, but bringing on the contractor very early in the process is absolutely key, and it's into third, fourth project now where that's happened. It has to be instigated by the client. The client has to go out and seek, at the same time the client's speaking to consultants about, a job that's coming up, he's also got the contractors by his side. We then build a relationship with that contractor and welcome them into our, if you want to call it, design world, which is not a black art. It's quite, it's quite tangible and open, and it's quite a fun place to be in, and encourage the contractor's brain, if you like, to contribute to the design process. And the results, physical results of a project, I've got a couple of examples, but it is immense, and this is the front-end design, making key decisions about large projects especially, where if the contractor wasn't on board with that logistics plan, that, basic things to them that designers don't really consider when they're designing systems. So it's a collaborative learning process. It's very, very important.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be it's actually going to be the model. I'll go, just one more thing on that, is that I think also the traditional design, let's take D&B and traditional design, they're two different camps. I think they're being merged. I think there's a hybrid going to pop out the other end. I think it's already happening. And why do we have to go through concept, schematic design, detailed design, maybe another, tender docs, construction docs? Why do we need to go through all these phases if we do a sound, very well thought out concept plus in collaboration with the whole team? Why can't we go straight to detailed design and produce a set of tender documents? The answer is we can, and it's being done in this market. It's not all over them, it's not out there yet, but it's been done and it's coming, which means design consultants really have to think about the way they're working, because they will get left behind. We can't sit on laurels and say, oh no, we're not going to, if we're going to meet a program that's condensed, we'll cut a design stage out. It means a client, though, has to make major decisions and stand by them.
The amount of duplication that goes on in the life cycle of a construction project is crazy. It is. We all do the same work 3 or 4 times, and if you can do this collaborative approach up front, you make one set of decisions, you produce one set of documents, and the project proceeds.
The key to it is the client has to buy in, and they are buying into it. I'm talking about major clients now, that I won't name names, who are buying into this process, and they are approving conceptual information. Concept plus, again, it's concept enough to price, actually. From an MEP perspective, you provide basic schedules for major items of plant, so the QS can actually sit down and get an estimation of the major kit. But the key is architecture has to be signed off, and that's where we get caught short, because it's the architecture that keeps changing. It's not necessarily, we're not driving the architecture, we're supporting the architecture.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Now, adding to that, I see some projects where you have the design, the contractor comes in and price it, and it's over budget. So what is the role of the cost consultant or the consultant in general and the integrated design approach? So, okay, we did integrated design approach, but we overshot the budget by 30%. George, what do you think? How should we?
Yeah.
Because I've seen it in many projects.
I agree. It used to happen previously, but I think nowadays there is an awareness between the developers, the consultants, and the contractor that the early involvement of the cost consultant is essential, and I can say even crucial. In our designs nowadays, of course, we will have the cost consultant assigned independently by the client, because to be neutral and to be at the third party. He will be involved from the early concept stage to put the budget. And he will not intervene only on the milestones. He will be across all the workshops to maintain the budget, like a guardianship for the budget. You will not end up with surprises at the end of the design, like 30% shooting above the budget that you are working on. So my view is there is awareness nowadays. Sometimes you need to educate the client to impose it on him, or if not, we normally in AECOM use our internal cost consultants because, you know, we have it in-house.
Bill, adding to that, and I have experience sometimes with the cost consultants that sometimes you need to educate them as well on
Yeah.
they don't understand the aspiration of the project, especially from a MEP point of view. And
to help them.
They say, well, we didn't see this on the drawing, we did not price it. But you should have known that without this, the system does not work. The chiller is missing, so you
But
don't
a
have
decent
cooling.
cost consultant should have enough data to be able to put a sense check on a square foot, square meter basis to give himself the sense
That
check.
is true, yeah.
And not only this, he should come from an engineering background in my view.
Yeah,
He should have worked
I've
as a
had that
consultant.
problem with many cost consultants where they don't understand what they're pricing.
Yeah.
Well, the core team that you mentioned, you know, is, you know, the architect. What we missed off that list actually is a cost consultant. They need to be at the table during that front end design stage. They need to be. You can cost a concept within 10% of the final price. You can do it,
Yeah.
but the design of that concept, the approach to it, mechanically, electrically, plumbing, structurally, architecturally, it has to be done in the right way. You can. We enter GMPs on projects that start off schematic design stage.
I think
So, Bill,
what-
yeah, my question
It's
to you
okay.
is that integrating the cost consultant with the team and helping them understand what they require versus doing your own cost estimation as the consultant. Which one is the
But
preferred way?
Yeah, all interesting points. I think that's one of the key things which I'm working hard with my team at the moment. The team are MEP design engineers, and anybody that's a consultant out there will know that design engineers are very clever people associated with engineering and engineering solutions. I'm trying to not make a full global switch, but the tech smart, and now I'm trying to make them cost smart as well, the staff themselves, so that they can provide the advice to the cost consultant who often doesn't have an in-depth knowledge of MEP services and MEP services costs. But to be able to design within the budgets which they almost set themselves, so that the solutions that we do provide are not overrunning the cost budgets. So that's the first thing. The second thing, just really touching on what Gavin was saying and the sort of integrated design process, and again, ensuring that the engineers are not just tech smart but cost smart as well. But where I see the consultant merging better with a contractor much earlier in the design process is we can be much more transparent as a team, where we can understand from a contractor's point of view what the construction constraints are of a project, what's the logistics that are happening on site, when things are going to be delivered, how are you going to build this, what is your who are your suppliers, who are your preferred suppliers, who have you got the best deals with, and then that enables our design engineers to design collectively in an integrated manner with other disciplines as well a solution for a project that is bespoke for the project, which channels, you know, we can get, you know, if the contractor's got an open door to prefabrication, we can start designing prefabrication so it fits in. If the contractor has a strategy on how he's going to build the project phase A, B, C, D, whatever it is, we can then say, right, we're going to target this area in the design process because of that this can be built quicker. You know, is the areas of the projects which have long, I mean, the beauty of working within the Middle East, the projects are so huge. So, you know, we can get sort of prefabricated to a certain extent, you know, back of house corridor areas, which will come in 3-meter lengths, ductwork, cable tray, bang, it just goes in. But it's working collectively with the contractor, not only to provide MEP design solutions, but to understand from a contractor how they're going to build it, where the suppliers are coming from, and really working up that relationship with them and gathering that information so that we can get it into the design and be much more cost effective.
Georges, what about BIM and integrated design approach? How does it help in achieving that?
I believe, Hassan, they complement each other. So nowadays, everybody is using BIM. It is deployed all over the place in all the consultants. With integrated reality, augmented reality, sorry, you can see your building before building it, and it will help the contractor later on to do the modular construction that you were working on and that we were talking on. So I think BIM will give a big push to the integrated design approach, and it will help all parties, starting from contractor, client, and the consultant himself.
Thank you.
I think just on the BIM side as well. And I think, you know, an integrated design process is not just engaging with the people as part of the design team, it's engaging with the software packages as well, which I talked about at the beginning about the building physics, and also with BIM as well. I think we need to be very focused as the construction industry as a whole, where this digital, where is it taking us? Where is the future of design? Where is it going to be? Because, and this is a very, you know, very big component. Each software package, so IES as an engine, and it's doing energy modelling, and then you've got HAP that do the HAP calculations, and then you've got AMTEC, which are doing the electrical calculations, and ETABS are doing the structural calculations. Eventually, over time, and it's not long, I don't think it's very long away, these things are going to merge. These are going to merge together into one unit suite that will be able to provide a full complement of architectural and engineering design services. So what we need to be thinking about in the future is how we embrace the digital and innovation moving forward, and how we can operate in an integrated manner with what's coming in the future. You know, to a certain extent, when you're talking about BIM, how many buildings in the area now have been performed and modelled in BIM? Yeah. That formulates a database. There's now almost a database of buildings which are available almost off the shelf, and eventually, with the digital market, the coming together of the various software packages, plus the database of information that's available, brought together, becomes a very, very powerful machine, whereby we can almost have, even through an integrated design process and manner, you know, off-the-shelf buildings almost ready with construction drawings ready to go.
Yep.
We need to think about that in the future.
One of the things it's doing is actually, I don't actually like, I mean, BIM is a much bigger word and subject, but from an MEP perspective, what we're doing is digital engineering, and we're using a particular piece of software, which is, in our world, is Revit, but it's physically changing the structure of teams. So, you know, as we mentioned earlier, you know, we've got this offshoring model in Bangalore or Manila or Vietnam. It doesn't matter where it is, but there's, you know, there might be 200 people sitting there working on these mega projects that we get involved with. In the old days, you'd have maybe 100 CAD guys and 100 engineers working collaboratively to produce drawings. And then when we switched to digital engineering, to a 3D environment, we continued that way, and we started to fail because you can't apply a 2D environment to a 3D way of working. So the separation between engineer and what was a CAD engineer are now one thing. There is no separation. I don't employ someone that's got the ability to model unless they can engineer at the same time. So it's cutting a whole process down. If you're marking drawings up in a 3D environment as a 2D world and engineers giving 2D markups to your 3D team, and they're doing the magic on that, in my view, you haven't taken that leap. It's a leap that you learn when you go to an offshoring centre and you watch the way they physically operate. You spend 2 weeks in their environment and you watch the way they work. It's very different to how we used to work. We have to make that change. Otherwise, you won't get out of the process what you set out to do. You'll have lots and lots of challenges.
One last challenge I see also is the way we still submit drawings to the authorities. So let's say we look at the municipality, we have the architectural initial submission that doesn't take into account any MEP. And it could be, let's say, a water-cooled system that the MEP designer had in mind, but the architect did not have that provision for cooling towers, let's say. So do you think that authorities need to change the way they require submissions so that they make sure that the integrated approach is happening. Because, you know, now with the municipality, you submit the final drawings. You don't really go into iterations. It's just one set of drawings. And normally as an MEP, let's say, company, sometimes we get the architectural drawings like these are initially approved by the municipality. You know, you have to live with it. So what do you think that the change of the way we submit to the authority is required as well?
I think you can do it. You can do it in stages because it's done in other parts of the world. You do not need a completed design end to end to submit to the authorities. So you can go through various stages. You know, what does the authorities, if it's the electrical authority, what do they want? The total connected load. Why? Because they need to check the substation capacities in the area. So you can do that first stage before you go into detail. So yes, I think there's a place for that in this market. I would like to also see the authorities get more involved rather than just be you could call them back of house, but they're not. But they don't get involved in the projects. They just come at the inspection point. They do the approvals away from site. And I think if authorities get more involved in project development, particularly at the design stage, you're probably going to see their vision and their planning capabilities improve too. Don't know about the other guys.
I would like also to add that in Europe, in Canada, in the USA, the integrated design approach is mandated by the authorities. It's not a choice to the consultant to do. So I think sooner or later it will become the trend in the UAE. So this is my view on it.
I just want to go back to, we were talking about BIM before, you know, to give you a sense of what the value of BIM is, and a lot of people still are struggling to understand the value of BIM on a project, although it looks dazzling on the screen. And yes, it should be adaptable to go over to FM operations. We've got some wonderful new technology with people walking around with masks and looking through the ceiling in, you know, in a virtual reality. What we're doing, this is a contractor's perspective at EFICO, we have our own modularisation facility, and what we're doing with clients up front is actually giving them visibility of what their services look like in an installed as-built manner. So we are, on all projects now, as part of our process, what we're doing for the client is we're saying, here is what your modules are going to look like. Here is what your plant room looks like. Not based on a 2D drawing, but based on a 3D drawing. And the only way we can do that is because of the adoption of BIM. So I think that's a value add that we give to the market and we give to the owners. So BIM is more than just about all the integrated design. I think it's actually a little bit of value add for the customer at the end of the day.
So it's integral to the whole process.
Yeah.
I mean, modularisation goes back to concept. As a designer, you're thinking of modularisation as a designer, or I would argue you should be.
Yeah.
From a modularised perspective, we need to standardise what we do. If we've got a 2 million square metre retail city that we're designing, then every cluster that supports an area of that retail district should be the same. Yes, different load centres, there's different, you're feeding out to different types of areas, but when a contractor gets hold of it, he should see straight away that you've got, 200 cores in this development, and they're all modularised the same. The reaction you get when you sit with a contractor and he sees that, straight away, you're in partnership with them straight away. You have to think about it from a modularised approach. Again, you won't meet your cost targets. The client will not get his return on investment. An MEP is what, 30% of the build budget, approximately?
We hope it is.
on a $2 billion project, that's a lot of money. We're not talking about small amounts of money here. It's huge amounts of money being invested into the project, and they become assets to the project. So the more we can modularise and standardise, it then lends itself to this collaborative approach with both the back-end design, with our offshoring models, but also when it gets to site and it's physically buildable. A contractor should be able to take an LOD, say 300 model, detailed design model, if it's correctly put together, and that's the key as well, because a lot of them look good, but when you get into it...
they look good, but they're not built well.
They don't function as they should. Many contractors have to redraw the model.
Yeah, I remember in 2009, I was working on an airport, and the ducts had the sprinklers inside them, and pipes, plumbing pipes. Now, do you have any questions from the audience?
Thank you for the panel. My question is from the supplier perspective. When we talk about BIM and when we talk about 3Ds, I mean, this is going to be an actual size and an actual dimension in terms of 3D. So what's your expectations as consultants from the supplier to be able to provide to you to be able to do this process in an efficient way?
If I may answer this one, because I would like to say that having said all this, BIM is not used as its full capacity, because BIM is an excellent tool for coordination, first of all, for specification and for takeoff. So I think the role of the material supplier is in the specification. You will be able, if BIM is used to its full capacity, to select the item and see the full specification when it's coming, from where it's the country of origin, and all the specs and the compliance related to the item itself. So in my view, I can see a full benefit from the supplier in this part of the BIM.
No, so what the supplier, in the ideal environment, is as part of the supply agreement, let's just take, for example, we buy some generators or chillers or something from you. As part of your supply agreement, you also give us the information, and you actually should be able to actually pick up off a tablet an icon, and that icon comes, and that icon's inserted into the BIM model, and within that icon it's got all the performance specs, everything. Say country of origin, you buy the purchase date, the warranty date, and all of that should transfer through the operations.
Essentially, you need to give us full disclosure of your intellectual property as early as possible. I mean, to go back another step, is that it's a big issue at the moment, is where, again, at concept stage, we should be sitting down with the client and agreeing to some form or another an agreed list of manufacturers we're going to use, because we will base our design, chillers, AHUs, fan coils, whatever it is. As a designer, we will pick one, and we will model that in our modelling environment. It doesn't mean that that one will eventually get to the other end, but that's the basis of our. We're not going to choose one that's super slim or compact, to be mid-range. If we can nail down the choice of suppliers, one, it gives the suppliers a fair crack that are on into that project. But then the view could be taken that if you only got 3 suppliers for each element, that we're not opening the market up enough to be competitive and the client won't get best value. So it's a very complex issue. But ultimately, we need from you as a manufacturer, give us your model information, give us it, we'll save it. That becomes one of our standard details, and we'll use it quite happily. I mean, if it saves my team drawing something from scratch, I'd happily take it from you, because it saves me money and time and effort. And if I draw it, it's going to be a lot less detailed than what you guys would give me. So yeah, I think most manufacturers, to be fair, provide that information to us now, if not all.
Correct.
Yeah.
Do we have any other question?
Sir, in BIM design, once we do MEP design under that, so BIM families LOD5 is going to really work out for execution purpose? Are you using these concepts? BIM families?
Well, yeah, the BIM family is integral to the model. Is what you have to decide from the start of the modelling process. Every company's got their own slight angle on it, but essentially it's the same thing. If you get that wrong from the start, if you don't set your BIM families up correctly, the model's not worth the paper it's written on, or in our case, the screen that it's displayed on. The families have to be set. This is all part of the BIM execution plan. Everything has to be done from the start.
Early on.
But we have to be careful here, because you cannot use the BIM model as workshop drawings. Because, the selection may come later, and the material itself may not be the same one that you have selected during the design.
Sure.
We should be very careful on not using the BIM model as a workshop drawing.
So as BIM is claiming like this technology itself, like if we are using a BIM families LOD5, it's directly like supply chain management directly. Is it like, put your light something on this matter? Supply chain management, directly the BIM family which we are using, the supplier or manufacturing directly sending that equipment to the site.
Yes, that's...
So if you are using LOD5 detail level, so it may be useful for workshop drawing and
procurement. This will be the ideal word, but I don't think this will happen.
Absolutely. That is its... I mean, I think you said, George, earlier that if you take BIM in our world as a whole, we're probably using 40% of its capacity right now, and we can't bite off more than we can chew. But ultimately, yes, we need to get where you're suggesting, but we're not there yet. No. We're still learning every day, every week. We're still, we're still going through this transition process, to be fair. Believe it or not, even in the firm that I work for, we still do 2D work. We still haven't made that full transition. We're still going through the learning curve, and it's going to continue for some time.
Yeah, I think BIM is the future, and definitely is the future, and going to higher levels, using it with FM. I see a lot of talk on that, but it's not really being used for FM yet. So yeah, that's probably the future, using it for energy modeling, design tools, calculations, having everything on one platform probably is the future, but probably in the next few years it could come. Any other questions before we wrap up? No. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for attending the fourth edition of the MEP conference. I think now it's time for lunch. Lunch will be served outside, I guess. Thank you very much for attending, and thanks to all the sponsors, and thank you for MEP Magazine for making this happen. Thank you all.